Okay, hello, Mama. Welcome back to Chatalyst.
Hello, my darling. How are you?
Good. Now, again, I'm going to start with I am overwhelmed by the response that our little, I'm going to call it an experiment. It is. It's a really fluid experiment that we're doing. And I am flabbergasted by how this is connecting with people and who's reaching out and how it's resonating and how it's helping people want to have their own conversations. So,
Mm.
with that in mind, I know that we had said that we did want to talk about where and how feelings and your sense of self and all that kind of stuff sit in your body and how that relates to how we get on and how we work and blah 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 and we will we will do that. But what has become incredibly apparent to me is that the people that have been reaching out to us, there seems to be this common theme and this common thread of, I just don't know how to start this conversation, or I wish I could say this to this important person in my life, or, yeah. So I thought, if you're up for it, we would kind of talk about how we got here, and
Mm-hmm.
not in like an ethereal sense, but in like a, how did we get from saying the meanest things possible to each other, physically tearing each other apart, to being able to have these conversations? And
Mm.
I think the journey is going to be, or it's going to be quite different for both of us. Um, but yeah, if you want to start
Sure.
off with your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're right. What's become apparent is that there are a lot of people hurting who want to say something, but are
Mm.
terrified to do so. And
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's not easy. And one person always has to start.
Mm.
And in my experience, for the person who decides to start their inner work journey, uh, it is about delving into the things that your biggest fears. All right.
Mm.
So let's start where I was. All right. I was a red hot mess. When I look back, I don't even know how I got to 50 without tripping and stumbling and having to do
You
so
did.
much. Oh yeah, but I know, but I still thought I had control and I still thought that I could fake it.
Mm.
Yeah, until I couldn't. And what I have learned is that what is universal for all of us is that we have these three fears which govern our lives. And the fears make sense. And so I'll talk about how they played out for me.
Mm.
So the first big fear is the fear of abandonment or of being unlovable. And these are primitive fears and they make sense because if I am unlovable, completely unlovable, I will be abandoned by my tribe and I will die because we are herd animals. We need connection. And the way that played out for me is that I believed I had to do things in order to be lovable. So I abandoned myself so that other people would like me, that
Mhm.
I was always doing and I was very busy doing and I would be that person. No, don't worry, I'll do that. That'll be fine. No, I'll do that. And I would always um, want to make sure that I was useful and capable. And what happened every time I did that, like for decades, what happened was in abandoning myself, I lost touch with the things that actually made me happy and all of that. So that was abandonment. I just completely abandoned myself in the service of others. And I'd learned from my mum to do exactly that. And I thought that's what unconditional love was, that you put everyone else before you and you consider yourself way back in the field And that's how you show you love people. That was abandonment. And then there's worthlessness. And the whole thing with worthlessness is if I am worth less than everyone else in the tribe, I will be the last one to get food, clothing, shelter, a mate, and without resources, I will die. So that I need to prove that I am better than others so that I'm not the most worthless person, even though that's what I feel.
So it's almost like it's like that real masking front thing. So when you feel worthless, you're a real fucker. Like you really, well, I mean, this is not everyone, but um, you attack you like what? How did that play out?
Well, for me, I overachieved. All right. The thing when worthlessness is playing out, though, is it doesn't matter how much you do or how much you have or how much you achieve. It's never enough because underlying all that is the sense that it's not enough, that it's not good enough. So that what I did was I overachieved. I had to be seen to be perfect, even though I knew that I was just so worthless. So what that meant for me as well is that my children had to look perfect and my marriage had to look perfect and this had to look perfect and my house had to look perfect. And when we had people over for dinner, every glass, even the ones that we weren't using, had to be clean and all the cupboards had to be cleaned and this had to be done. It didn't matter if they were going upstairs, everything had to be perfect. So it added this level of stress. And then the third fear is powerlessness. That if I'm not, and again, it makes sense because if I'm not in control of my own life, that's a really unsafe way to live. And so the way I made that is, again, what I would do is I'd try to micromanage. And I would try to, I felt that if I controlled everything that my kids did and everything that they ate and everywhere they were and who they met and what they did, they would be safe. I would be safe. Everyone would be fine. Now, as we know, none of that played out like that. But I was told
everyone's fine.
Well, everyone's fine now. But those were the things driving me. And it wasn't until I actually did that deep inner work that unhooked all the triggers around that stuff for me that I could let that stuff go.
Now, on that, I want to bring up something that's quite again, we can only talk about our situation, but was quite poignant for me in that situation where until I had sorted my own shit out or started really prioritizing that, watching someone that love is irrelevant here. We're going to assume that in our situation, love is irrelevant. That was always there. But
Correct.
watching someone that you see as the cause of your trauma, be that true or not, watching someone, for me, you go through that process and start really working on your own thing. It isn't easy. It is fucked. Watching your abuser heal, it's so like you it's and again, it's all your own shit, right? Of course. But it's how dare you? How dare you be okay? This is fake, obviously.
Clearly.
Obviously it's fake because how could you be unhooking that trauma, like, and it's again, like you're obviously only responsible for yourself. So 100% projection. But when there's a really prickly situation that's been going on for years, it is so incredibly confronting because obviously I had those exact same, I mean, not the glass is clean thing. My again, deep Capricorn control freak worked in different ways. But it's, you know, because I'm not really explaining it right, but you feel like you're watching someone heal and your own trauma is saying, how dare you? How dare you heal? We
Because it's your fault. You don't
Yeah,
get to heal.
yeah, exactly. It's your
Mm.
fault we're like that. It's your and it's yeah, and it's really I don't think that's something that should be overlooked in this process that we went through because
Mm-mm.
it led me to not being, if possible, being less nice to you and more manipulative. But it's almost like the crescendo of my pain wasn't the screaming, the fighting, that was all symptomatic, you know?
Mm.
It was watching you start healing. It was almost like a betrayal because there was almost like this trench buddies thing, right? Where
Mm.
it was like any abusive relationship where it's like the highs are so high because the lows are so low. So it was always even because love was never an issue. Um, and we knew that we had been healing our relationship for 10 years prior to you doing like
Mm.
we'd always been besties. We'd just been at each other's throats.
Mm.
But it was almost like because of that, that was a bond we had.
And I decided that I wasn't gonna do that anymore. I
Yeah.
decided to change the rules.
Yeah.
And
And
I
it's
unilaterally changed the rules. I didn't ask you.
no, no, you didn't. And it's weird because why would you? Your healing has nothing to do with me.
Mm.
But from my perspective, it was, how dare you change the rules?
Mm.
You not only change the rules, you change the game, the arena. I'm running out of sport analogies because they're not really my thing.
You don't have many.
You change the script, you change the score, you change the theatre. That I can do.
The dance routine.
It's routine. But suddenly it was all improv.
Mm.
We didn't have,
Mm.
um, and I couldn't, uh, because perfectionist here, even perfectionist in your healing, I'm joking, but you worked so hard on those boundaries and rewriting your own stories, which I wasn't in your head when you did that. I can't imagine how incredibly difficult and isolating that would have been because it was that we were improving. We couldn't go back to how we were.
No, we
And we
couldn't.
felt alone.
And so did I, right? I remember thinking for a long time there that nothing can be the same. And I don't know what the future looks like. I just know that I have to do things differently than I have. And I know I can't live like that anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And it it really wasn't, it was isolating
Mm.
because as well, you're really vulnerable when you're first going through that because you are rediscovering who you are and what's important to you and what makes you happy and the values that really light you up.
Mm.
And when you're in that process, the people who object the most are the people who felt most connected to you in that old state. And the
Yeah.
people who resent the boundaries are the people who benefited or were comfortable when you didn't have any.
Mm.
Right? So there's all that. So there is the pain of self-discovery, and then there is also that trying to, with that new you, have enough resilience, I guess, to be firm in that new you.
Mm.
And the only way to do that is to surround yourself with people who have been through that journey. So for me, I didn't do my inner work with one-on-one coaching. I did
Mm.
it through workshops. And for me, that worked for me because I then had these people who'd done exactly what I'd done at the same time. And even though within the workshops you work in pairs, so that it's not like everyone is hearing all your stuff,
Mm.
but people understand the journey. And so I made really firm friendships and connections there where people were speaking the same language I was speaking. People understood what was happening. They understood what was happening out in the real world. Because, for 3 days, you're in these little workshops.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, your deep cults, because how dare anyone be happy?
right? That's it. Yes, I know. And you used to just sneer and they go, "Oh, you're cult."
Mm. Mm.
And is that at any point trying to put down what I was doing, and it was like, yeah.
Mm.
I guess what happened for me though then, it was really interesting because doing my own and disconnecting from my stuff, what it allowed me to understand was that the invitation is always there for each of us
Mm.
to do the same. And now a
Yeah,
lot of people don't know they have a choice. And a
yeah.
lot of people know they have a choice, but for whatever reason, they don't want to. But what became really important for me was, and I guess that's why I then started this work and started running those workshops and doing all of that, was because I wanted people to understand they had a real choice and it was possible.
Mm. Yeah, because it's
So
really
where was the moment for you when you went, "Oh, shit, I guess I'm gonna have to do this shit"?
it was not, something that I would say happened quite, it didn't happen easily. So,
Mm,
it took me a really long time to this is gonna sound really weird to say, right? But it took me a really long time to forgive you for not hurting over my pain.
mhm,
And probably my big moment, and taking into account, I thought I was because I had worked through so much stuff with uh, therapy. I'd kind of at this point, I think I'd got my meds leveled out. They hadn't changed in ages. Um, you know, like uh, classic people pleaser. I made sure my psychiatrist felt like they were fixing me. So every time I went in, I'd tell them I was a bit better, just
mm,
maybe so I believed it myself. Anyway, um, uh, all of that stuff, great in its own right. But so my big moment was we were in New Caledonia,
yeah.
and the only reason I got the trip to New Caledonia is because Justy had to work and couldn't go, um, and I just and again, like, the relationship we had, of course, I would be your next choice to go. Like, it
Mhm.
just and that's not even when we were in a super good place, or, like, I thought we were in a really good place, but I think I was still not really seeing what you did. But the clincher was, I was going to New Caledonia with the cult.
Yeah.
This
That's right,
unbelievable.
'cause we had an 8-day or 10-day course there that I was doing. You were not gonna do the course, but I
No,
was.
no, no, no,
Mm,
but I was there with the cult,
mm, mm,
and I was surrounded by, because in my head I was like, "Pfft, you guys do your fucking woo-woo shit, I'm gonna lie on the beach with a Mai Tai and a book," which
You
did
did.
I did, uh, but also it was just it I'd met these people before. I'd been to workshops we'd done before. I had, um, been the smiling daughter, said all the right things, had versions of this conversation we're having right now, but it was performative,
Mm,
It was like and I'd be sitting around at dinner and just listening to you guys talk about what you did that day, and the way people were expressing their feelings and the way that people were talking to each other. And it wasn't, even though there were jokes and stuff, it wasn't mean-spirited. And I had this realization that my personality and my humor, it relied on what I thought was being funny and sassy, but it was like kind of mean. And I was like, why is that? And then we went and had this meditation one night on the beach under a full moon. And I was like, oh, whatever, we're going to go. And I had this, like, like I was doing meditation, could not stop sobbing. It was like, because we connected to and I had my hands in the sand, sitting on the beach in New Caledonia, and my body was tingling. And it was like, I gave myself permission to not have this trauma anymore. Look at it. Oh, fuck me. These are happy tears though now.
Yeah, I know.
And I sobbed. I remember walking back. It was probably a half an hour walk back from the beach to our over the water beach hut where we swam with turtles. We were really slumming it. But I shook and sobbed the whole time. And I think that was like, okay, like I'm not okay. I thought I was. I was like, you've clocked therapy, you've clocked psychiatry, you are fixed. And it was kind of things fit together, right? It suddenly made sense why you'd made the changes you'd made. I realized that I gave myself permission to not have this crippling hatred. And it was like I was addicted to that, that feeling of being mad at you, of being connected to this trauma, it was like that was the moment where I was like, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. And I'm not going to say, it was a magical moment and then suddenly everything was fine and we could have these really open conversations. And no, that it was more just like, okay, so now how do we get there? And I wasn't ready to have conversations with you.
No.
I couldn't you tried to do some of the stuff with me that you do with your clients, and I just couldn't get to a place where it felt natural. I didn't fight it, but I was like, it was still a bit performative. I was like, I can't say these things yet. It was either I wasn't ready to say them, or it's like the pendulum had swung so far in the other direction where it was like, well, now I don't want to hurt you. Weird feeling. But it was like, I don't want to say these things because they will hurt you, because I obviously still had really big triggers in them. And yeah, and I don't know and I don't think in this relationship, like, I feel like just because you started the healing journey first doesn't mean that it's different, that it's not different in other situations, like, or in other different relationships. Like, there's always someone, as you said, there's always someone who has to start. Someone has to go, we can't fucking do this, or not even we. I can't.
Yeah. I can't do it, right? And
I
I think as well that it's that thing, one person has to start the healing journey, and this is an ongoing process. I'll be doing this while I'm sliding into the grave, right? Like, this is ongoing.
I'll be pushing you. It's fine.
And the thing is that we couldn't have conversations. It was okay if you still had barbs that you wanted to fire at me. Once I had done enough work to forgive myself
Mm,
and to love myself so that your barbs were not triggering my abandonment and worthlessness issues,
mm,
right? Once I had dealt with those, then I could hear you. Before
mm,
then, we couldn't have a conversation because I couldn't hear it.
mm,
Like, you know, it just wasn't possible. But once I had cleared those beliefs and those fears, then I could hear you. And it's not that it didn't hurt. Of course it does, because when you realize just how much pain you've caused for someone that the moment you were born, I would die for you and I would kill for you. I was going to be the best parent ever,
mm,
ever. And to know that what I'd done instead had been so traumatic
mm,
meant that I had to be really healed in order to hear that.
mm.
Right. And now what I have is compassion for my younger self because I know what she wanted to do and what happened instead. So I have so much love and compassion for her. And that meant that then I could just be open, no matter where in your healing journey you were at,
Mm.
I was okay.
Two things I want to say. One, I'm not a parent, but I'm sick of this quantifying, and I know that we're talking about it. I'm sick of this quantifying, like what makes a good or bad parent? Everyone fucks, obviously we can say quantifiably things that make it a terrible parent, but like all this pressure to I need to be the best parent, I need to do this, I need to do I mean, who's to say you're kind of not, you know?
And as I say to, people, you will screw your kids up
Mm,
because there's going to be situations where they're going to make that situation mean something about them.
mm.
Now, you might not have meant that, but they're going to make it mean that they're not good enough or they're not lovable or whatever. And they're going to take that with them.
But I
And
mean,
you might not even know you did it.
as a
Right?
kid, everything's about you, right?
Correct.
It's, uh, you that's because that's all you know. So everything is about you. But the other thing I wanted to say is talking about not being ready to have the conversation, da da da. Do you remember? Must have been, oh, when would it have been? Maybe 2008 or 2009. We went to Blues. I mean, you and I always went to Blues Fest, but the whole family went to Blues Fest.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I think it might have been the first year that it moved out to the tea farm. And we were staying on the other side. It was this massive walk to get there. And we're walking there, and I mean, you and Dad are still together, like, so obviously no healing has started for us. But I tried to start a conversation about a note on the fridge that I remember growing up. And um and it was about me and Finn. It's something like think before you eat or something like that. Because looking at Finn now, how the hell would you believe that he was a chubby kid? But he's got the heart of a fatty.
We all do.
But it was this. I remember it being this moment because you had no memory of it, and Finn had no memory of it. Finn remembers fucking nothing about his childhood. So,
That's okay.
yeah, but it then became this whole Jessica, you make things up, and like my siblings were joking about it, and you were joking about it, and Dad was joking about it, and I even think my sister-in-law might have been there, my cousin Caitlin, like my sister-in-law Julia, and everyone, and it was this joke, right? And it was we were a joking family. There was you could have joked about my bipolar to the nth degree, but the triggers were so deep that I fucking cracked it, turned around and walked home, didn't go to the festival that day.
Yeah.
And but also one of the reasons is I know that it would have messed up your day as well. Even though you were there, you would have pretended like I think you came home early.
Possibly.
and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we had a glass of wine, but it was also that kind of
But that
abusive
was that abusive
toxic.
relationship we had
Yeah,
where typical drama triangle, right?
yeah,
You're the persecutor, then felt guilty and had to rescue me. I felt like the persecutor, I had to come back
yeah.
and rescue you. We're both like, yeah.
Yeah, overachievers, all of them all at once. But
Correct.
it was that thing I knew, and it might not have, I mean, it might not have been conscious when I went, "I'm walking and I'm not going to the festival," but it definitely was by the time I got home. I was like, "Mum's gonna come home," because we would be texting or something, and,
Mm,
"I'm so sorry, I love you, da, 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 da." You would have come home, you would have had a bottle of wine, and it would have been like, "Everything's okay now," or
yeah.
like that the world is okay again because we've
We've
better
got that
than we know.
equilibrium
Yeah,
back, right? But the
yeah.
equilibrium was like a thin thing over an active volcano,
Mm.
right? It was just this little thing over an active okay, okay, it's all good now, it's gone.
It's like
But it
those
hadn't
Japanese
gone.
game shows from the '70s where, like, the floor opens and then
Yeah, right? And yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whereas now what's happened is the volcano is so for you, so then you started, so then what?
Okay, honestly, to begin with, it couldn't be about you. It had to
Right.
be I wasn't ready to deal with the you stuff straight away.
No.
But I also probably didn't think or know that it was the biggest not the biggest problem myself. I didn't know that was the biggest hook that I had. Our
Mm,
and it wasn't and it was more that the hook was the toxic relationship,
mm,
not whatever had happened.
mm.
You know, it was that reliant, really, codependent relationship. Like
100%.
it was very trauma bondy and completely emotionally codependent on each other. Um,
100%.
but so it was a lot of me doing me stuff.
Mm,
Um, and during that time, our relationship wasn't great because I also think you would have not, I mean, as you said, this is a journey, but because there were conversations we kind of both knew we needed to have, but we weren't ready to have them yet, there was this kind of like weird, like the way that I'm thinking of it in my head is like I'm thinking of like an Escher painting or a Picasso,
with the
where it's
stairs or
yeah, where it's kind of like everything in it you can recognize all these bits individually, but they don't go together. So
correct, and I think what was happening then as well is that we didn't have the trust
mm.
yet to be able to feel that we could be completely vulnerable
Well,
and
because, we'd broken the structure that we knew trust as
mm,
had completely dismantled.
correct, correct,
And and that's not to say, like, you know, there's lots of things, outside of our relationship that happened at that time, and I don't actually think any of them contributed to the trust breaking. It was the fact that our relationship and the structure of our relationship completely changed.
mm,
So, there wasn't that trust there.
mm.
I didn't trust you to understand and and listen to what I was gonna say, and I'm sure
Mm.
you felt the exact same way.
I think what I felt was that if I tried to speak to you about how I, had forgiven myself or how, I'm not now who I was then, that you would consider that I was trivializing what happened and not
Yeah,
taking responsibility,
and
right?
you
So
were correct.
yeah.
Not
So
not the best.
so yeah, it wasn't easy. And yet
Mm.
what I know for me is that I needed to do what I did and I had to once I started this inner work. I needed to keep doing it because
Yeah.
I knew that what we had before wasn't sustainable anyway. And I didn't know what the future was going to be or how it would be, but I just had to know that if I was the best version of me without all those hooks, then I could probably respond to what was happening in a much more resourceful way than what
Mm,
I could in the past. And then once my energy changed, what I did recognize was that every relationship I had would change
mm,
because the way what I brought to every relationship changed.
mm.
So it
I
took a lot of courage, really, looking back at who I was 10 years
incredibly.
ago. Mm,
And I think probably the hardest one for me, and something that we still, I mean, I think we've actually got very healthy boundaries now, which doesn't mean we don't overshare and da da da. I think the hardest one for me was boundaries, um, because we had never had healthy boundaries, and
mm,
we'd either been too close or too apart,
mm.
and so I didn't feel to begin with like you would understand if I put them in, but also I didn't know how to set them. I didn't know what I actually wanted. And I guess it is that stepping out of the drama triangle thing and being able to observe it and go, okay, so this isn't good. But obviously, if there's obviously something there, right? Because I mean, if it was just a fucking codependent trauma bonding relationship, it's like, I don't know, the fucking drug friends you have when in your 20s. Not a relationship worth saving, even though you think it's the most important thing in your life at the time. But there was obviously something there for both of us
Correct.
that wasn't just for show, that wasn't just because we're family, because that's kind of bullshit as well, right?
Yeah.
If there was no saving this relationship and it was just toxic, and if I wasn't gonna come to the party at all, you would be so well within your rights to put boundaries in regardless of what I wanted and go, I'm either gonna have no contact with you or very controlled on my terms contact or whatever it is.
Well, and we've seen how that's played out with other relationships that I have,
Yeah.
right? That
They
has
always come back.
Why, yes, so far so good. But, that is the reality, that
Mm,
recognizing that you have to do what is most self-loving first,
mm,
and then from there, from that position of love, you are then able to have compassion,
yeah.
right? And people talk about putting on your own oxygen mask first. You have to.
Yeah.
You 100% have to.
Gonna say Mama Roo's got it. If you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna get anyone else to love you?
Correct.
Yeah. But it is that thing where it's I also, and this is we probably don't have time to go into this now, but I feel like it comes down to intent as well. Like, do you want to heal the relationship? Do you want to have that person in your life in a different context than they are now? And is talking to that person about, like, is it going to serve you?
Mm.
Or is it going to just come from a place of you wanting them to feel the pain that you're also feeling?
And well, that's not coming from a place of being of healing
But that's
and
what I
healing.
mean, where
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I don't want this to, um, for people to go off and be like, "Oh, Kat and Jess did this. Let's have this conversation." Where it's like, well, it's because if you're trying to hurt someone, you're just gonna fucking hurt yourself more
Well, the
because
only reason you wanna hurt someone is because you're in pain. It is that hurt people, right?
yeah,
So that if that's the intention, that's the big sign that you actually have more work to do.
yeah.
And honestly, when you are really comfortable with who you are, because what happens with the inner work, I mean, we can't change the past, but what we do is that you change what you made the past mean about you,
Yeah.
right? And when you heal that, when you realize that there's not one moment in your life where you have been unlovable. If you looked at a photo of you every single day of your life, you won't go, "Oh, she was lovable then, she wasn't lovable then." You
Mm.
might have done something that was silly, but that didn't make you unlovable.
Well, things might have been done to you. Someone
Yes,
might not have loved you in that moment, but it doesn't
but
mean you weren't
that but
lovable.
that's not about you, that's about
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
You make it mean that you're unlovable, okay? And in no moment were you ever worthless.
Mm. Do you know what's really interesting as well? I think a huge part in my growth and healing journey has been because you kind of become attached to your trauma armor, right? Like it's your personality, it's your whatever, it's your, you joke about it being a chapter in your autobiography, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And
I
and
have
I
done that.
think and I think there's this part of you that goes, "Well, far out, if I" it's like the idea of taking, an antidepressant, right? Which was like, but if I and this is again only me, but if I take this, it's gonna change who I am. Well, for me, if I didn't get the thing right, but for me, when I got the concoction right, it just removed the Besser brick off my chest when it was there. When the elephant was standing on my chest and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't think, uh, that removed it. Might have taken a sex drive, but it's realizing that that changing how you connect to the past doesn't change that. It doesn't, make you less interesting, less creative, less but it kind of gives you the permission for that to not be your whole personality, because it's actually like and I used to love you'd sit around and you'd have a couple of drinks and you'd share your stories and your war wounds and your this happened, that happened. D&Ms, I'm gonna tell you this traumatic thing. Fuck off. Tell me about your healing. Tell me about how you should see my group chats. You tell me about, like, what is bringing you joy today? What is, you know, what did you and however you get your healing. What did you talk about in therapy? How are you, oh shit, something came up. Well, is that something you're ready to tackle now? Is that it's so interesting.
Mm.
It's so people's future and people's growth is so much more interesting, and yeah, my middle age is probably showing, but it's so much more interesting to me now than that kind of, like, trauma bonding. I wanna heal
Because
bond.
that's stuck. Yeah, exactly, right? Because trauma bonding is stuck and there's
Yeah.
no way out. Whereas this healing bonding, this heal bonding is like anything's possible. How bloody exciting is this? Like
Possible.
anything is possible.
And fuck, but it is not.
Mhm.
Healing bonding, it ain't easy because 'cause you're doing the work all the time, right? And you think,
Mhm.
you got all your hooks out about something and da 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 da, and then suddenly you're like, fuck off. Why is that still there?" Or
Yeah.
like, you get a big feeling about something and you're like, instead of it being debilitating, it might be debilitating for a day, might be debilitating for a week. It's not debilitating for a month or a year or
Mhm.
like it's
Mhm.
just, um, yeah, I just look, if I can sum up this tangent that I've taken us on,
Yeah, please.
it's for me personally, it was worth it. It was worth the fear of the unknown, was worth it. To our relationship aside,
Mm,
for me, right?
mm,
The fact that the side effect from me realizing that I didn't have to carry that pain anymore, the fact that that means that we now have the relationship we have, that I now have better relationships w with a lot of other people, fantastic. But But the fact that I'm not, that I don't, I've given myself permission to not carry that pain.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, all this has been about freedom.
Yeah.
It's about freedom. It is about unhooking from all of those things that kept me terrified.
Mm. Yeah.
And from that place of feeling free, I now have the energy to just be and just to be present. That's what I have the energy. Fear stopped me being present. I was always either stuck in the past or projecting anxiously to the future.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
now I can just be present.
And that freedom as well, it gives you the ability to have conversations that do help clear the air or
Mhm.
whatever without that that pain hook that I want you to feel what I felt.
Mm,
Because while I recognize that I felt that way, I don't feel that way anymore most
correct.
of
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Big one, my darling.
Yeah. Tell you what though, cathartic as it really is.
Yeah,
Uh,
correct. I
I
love you.
I was gonna say the same thing. Well,
Mm.
you go off to bed, I'm gonna go enjoy my day.
Yeah.
Sometime
Oh,
next week.
today's a holiday for you.
Oh, yeah.
You go with your husband, something else that's happened since you've healed.
Yeah, I
Mm,
know.
mm.
Yeah. Alright.
I love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Just ending.